Brent Venables mentioned Ben Arbuckle working alongside everybody that's currently on the offensive staff, but are there going to be guys that do go somewhere else? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, Jay, the Oklahoma Sooners coaching staff seems to be well intact. Obviously, they have a bowl game to play, but we're seeing movement across the college football landscape with assistants. We discussed it a little bit in yesterday's show, but are there guys on either side of the ball that you think Oklahoma could see find an opportunity elsewhere, either to be a play caller somewhere else or to get a promotion to be assistant or associate head coach somewhere?
I say, honestly, if you really look at the landscape of the roster, of the coaching staff roster for what Brent Venables has in place, John, we have to ask the question with the Oklahoma Sooners, who do we feel like has kind of underachieved at their position? Rank them from there and work your way up. Honestly, I've got one on both sides of the ball that has left more to be desired. Offense, of course, is going to be your tight end. So it'll be John Finley, who's the current offensive coordinator. He's not retained. Ben Arbuckle is going to take offensive coordinator and play calling duties. And the anticipation is, for me, and we talked about this last show, is that John Finley's probably going to move on somewhere where he gets the opportunity to call plays. Because truth be told, he wasn't awful. You know, he was dealt a pretty raw deal and a bad deck of cards, and he tried to make it work. It just has not worked. But he still needs to practice calling plays. And so somebody will probably give him the chance to do that with a bunch of healthy wide receivers that actually work in the scheme. He gets that. I do believe that he'll be able to move up the trajectory in the coaching tree, coaching ladders once again. So I could see that with John Finley. And if I have to pick a defensive guy, man, I'm wondering about Jay Valai. Now, granted, Valai has some fantastic recruits coming in over the last couple of years, and his transfers have been, I guess you could say, okay. I like Kanai Walker, I like Des Malone, but Kanai showed us that he's not really fast enough to keep up with the really fast corners, or he doesn't angle himself to prevent them from going past him. And Des does really good in zone, and that's really the only time they bring him in. He really only plays on the zone, and it kind of gives you a telltale of what your defense is going to be if you bring in a dude mainly for the zone. So, I mean, unfortunately for Valai, Gentry went down twice, right? So you haven't had to enjoy him. And then you've got Kendall Dobie that goes down, who was an elite nickel and cheetah for you. And you're playing with a bunch of young dudes. Jacoby Johnson's still trying to figure it out. Luckily, he's 6'2", and he's got some speed and athleticism, but he's still trying to learn the position. Makari Vickers has not been healthy, so you haven't really been able to see Seatbelt out there. But Eli Bowen has shown up. Problem is he's 5'9". And these big old corners, they're leveraging that against him as often as possible, just throwing it to places and making their receivers go catch it. So if there was the two, I would say there'd be questions that would be those two. I don't see Valai going anywhere because, again, I think the two corners he's bringing in Cortland Guillory as well as Malik Hawkins, both have basically said they're signing tomorrow. They're big 6'1", 6'2" corners, and they look really good, and they've got enough speed to keep up with everybody. And then if he keeps developing the young guys, I think he can redeem himself this coming season and stop us from getting burnt. But I don't know about tight end, though, because it don't look good.
Yeah, I mean, for John Finley, the tight end situation has not been good each of the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Bauer Sharp has had some solid moments, but he hasn't done enough for you to feel comfortable with the tight end position moving forward. I mean, you have to go back to 2022 when Braden Willis had his season. The last time you felt good about tight end, and that was a long time ago. And I don't even know if you can give John Finley the credit for that, because we haven't seen anybody take a step in the right direction since that point. With Jay Valai, I think you can feel good about where you're at with cornerback. Again, injuries have dealt him a difficult hand, but Eli Bowen stepped up and played well. Kanai Walker, Des Malone were solid. I don't know if you expected them to come out and be great and, first round NFL talents, but they were solid players. I think on a positive note, like a guy like Brandon Hall, he seems kind of destined to be a defensive coordinator somewhere at some point. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he found an opportunity to go be a defensive coordinator somewhere. I know that there was talk about him potentially taking the reins from Ted Roof last offseason when they ended up handing the defensive coordinator title to Zach Alley. That's not to say that he's not content in his safety role. I feel like he's done a really good job as the safeties coach. But if somebody says, hey, you know what, Brandon Hall, we want you to come be our DC, it wouldn't surprise me to see him take a job to go do that, because he is a bright young mind, and a lot of people think he's a former defensive coordinator. He's done it before. So does he want to get back to that at some point? We'll see.
Yeah, that is true.
He's done a good job with his position group, both as a developer and as a recruiter.
Yeah, he's done the job. So it's not something for us to think that he is out of the realm of possibility. And I mean, honestly, when you're looking at all these jobs out there, you ask the question if anybody on our defensive staff are interested in going to go be a defensive coordinator full time. Now, granted, I don't think you lose a Todd Bates, because I think if he's going to go be a DC, I think he'll be a DC at the SEC level. I think that if the SEC job came open, there's a potential for him to be there. But I don't think that. I don't see him going anywhere. Zach Alley just got here, and he's the DC, so he runs Venables' defense. So I don't see that being a change. Miguel Chavis, I don't know if he has aspirations for DC. Some coaches, position coaches, don't have that level of aspiration. Mm-hmm. They're happy where they're at. They enjoy the teaching portion of their job, and they want to stay doing what they do. So luckily, I think the Oklahoma Sooners have gotten coaches like that. Brent Venables have purposely gotten coaches that he brings them in, and they want to be that position. That's what they enjoy. They've got the full responsibility and ownership of it, and they work in collaboration with each other. And so for some, they want, like Bill Beatonbow doesn't want to be an offensive coordinator anymore. I've heard that through the grapevine a couple of times, that he's been there, done that. He's good. He's happy. He's content. He loves being in Oklahoma. He likes to go out and fishing, go on his boat, relax, but he enjoys the lifestyle of just coaching offensive linemen. I mean, heck, he's gotten so many offers for, jobs in the NFL, and he's passed on it mainly because he doesn't want to really move. He enjoys what he's doing, and Oklahoma's a premier job. He knows that. And so he enjoys that facet of it. So we got to stop, taking it for granted just because, things don't go the way we want them to. But John, I mean, it's all about now how many coaches we bring in is going to be super ambitious. Like, to me, Ben Arbuckle's successful. He's gone.
Yeah.
You keep him for what, 2 years?
If you see the end of his contract, I would be surprised.
Yeah, right. If he makes it all the way through 3 years, I would be shocked. While at the same time, I can almost expect it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 years, it gets him to age 32. Probably somebody feels more comfortable about hiring him as a head coach at that point. If he has the success that he needs to have at Oklahoma for this to be here beyond 2025,
right?
Then I think that's great. And I think 3 years is a good number, So I don't know. We'll see, man. It's going to be fascinating. I think you're right that a lot of the guys that are on staff right now don't seem to have those coordinator aspirations, but I would be surprised if a guy like Miguel Chavis isn't a head coach one day. The dude's just like too passionate. He's got too much energy. He just strikes me as somebody that could go be a head coach somewhere.
Me too.
Like Todd Bates seems very comfortable just kind of sitting in the background. You know what I mean? Yep. Like just doing his thing. And that doesn't mean he doesn't have aspirations. It just means he seems really content where he's at.
That's how I felt about Emmett Jones. I think that he's head coaching material. He comes across as a leader of men. So it's like, would he be a coordinator? I can see him pulling the Fran Brown deal, because Fran Brown was just the DB coach at Georgia. Now he's at Syracuse, killing it. I could totally see Emmett Jones doing something like that, ending up at like TCU or something, and just
like Jay Norvell. Like Jay Norvell, he did have the OC title, but he wasn't the play caller necessarily. But he did get a head coaching job out of that. So I think there are a lot of great position coaches across the country that would make great head coaches, but a lot of times administrators are a little bit leery of giving a position coach a head coaching job. So that's the fascinating thing, because you're right. I think Emmett Jones would do a great job. He'd be a fantastic recruiter as a head coach. I think Todd Bates the same. I think Miguel Chavis would be a great head coach, great recruiter without having that coordinator title. And we've seen it we've seen guys that go from being a special teams coordinator to being a really good head coach without having been an offensive coordinator in years past. So
We have.
not all paths are the same to the job. Look, Shane Beamer, to me, is a perfect example. He coached for a long time as an assistant, didn't really ever coach as a offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, but got an opportunity to be a head coach. And he's doing a really good job at South Carolina, a place that has moderate expectations. They're not expected to compete at the top of the SEC, but they're 9-3, had a ton of big wins this year. And that's not a dude that was a coordinator once upon a time. But So anyway, that's a digression, but I think it was a fun one anyway.
Always possibilities.
Shout out to Shane Beamer. Put them in the playoff, not Alabama. And that's for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're a part of the show, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell over there to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay on Twitter at Unfair Sports. Also check out his show, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. Follow me at John 9 Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. We'll have more for you this week covering the early signing day stuff. Hopefully nothing too dramatic that we'll have to discuss here on Locked On Sooners, that it's just smooth sailing. It's just a nice, easy trip through the early signing period. But there will be a lot of transfer portal stuff to get through this week and over the next month. So, again, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcast. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer.
Sooner.